Moving on, in a big development in the Adani case, the committee that has been set up by the Supreme Court in its report that was submitted to the Apex Court on the 6th of May has said that it currently cannot conclude that there has been a regulatory failure on the part of Stock Exchange Board of India on the allegation of price manipulation in the Adani-Hindenburg saga. That is the development coming in on the story. Listen into the reaction that came from court.
की हाईलाइट ये है कि रिपोर्ट ने ये बोला है कि हिंडनबर्ग रिपोर्ट पब्लिश होने से पहले कुछ लोगों ने, छोटे ग्रुप ने मार्केट में शेयर्स खरीदे, शॉर्ट सेलिंग करी, पोजीशन ली मार्केट में. हिंडनबर्ग रिपोर्ट लेते ही आते ही दे सोल्ड द शेयर्स. सो एक हिंडनबर्ग ने मार्केट के साथ खेला है, पब्लिक सेंटीमेंट के साथ खेला है और इंडियन इन्वेस्टर्स के पैसे के साथ खेला है. रिपोर्ट में ये लिखा है कि कोई साजिश थी, देयर वाज अ साजिश, कि रिपोर्ट से पहले पोजीशंस ली गई और रिपोर्ट के बाद वो स्क्वायर ऑफ हो गई. इसका मतलब ये है कि रिपोर्ट के पीछे एक इंटेंशन थी प्रॉफिट बनाने की, किसी और के लॉस करने की. ये अभी टेंटेटिव रिपोर्ट है, सेबी की रिपोर्ट अभी आनी है. 173 पेज की रिपोर्ट है ये. इस रिपोर्ट में ये लिखा है कि कोई प्राइस मैनिपुलेशन नहीं थी, कोई आर्टिफिशियल इंक्रीज नहीं था, जो भी रेगुलेटरी मैकेनिज्म थे उनको फॉलो किया गया, सेबी की तरफ से कोई रेगुलेटरी फेलियर नहीं था. सो देयरफॉर कोई इलीगैलिटी अभी तक नहीं हुई है. और सजेशंस और अभी कमेटी देगी कि क्या करना चाहिए फ्यूचर में. बट आज की डेट में इस रिपोर्ट के हिसाब से ना अडानी ग्रुप की कोई गलती पाई गई, ना उनके किसी इन्वेस्टर की गलती पाई गई. सिर्फ एक ही इशू है, हिंडनबर्ग रिपोर्ट के पहले और बाद में जो प्राइस मूवमेंट हुई है, इससे क्लियर पता लग रहा है कि कुछ ग्रुप ने इसका फायदा उठाया.
Several highlights there listed by Mahesh Agarwal. Siddharth now joins me on in the newsroom on the story. Siddharth, run us through the key excerpts.
Right, so Priya, some very important observations being made by an expert committee that was appointed by the Supreme Court to look into the larger regulatory framework in which these transactions took place and whether or not there was a regulatory failure. Now, the report at least is categorical on one count, which is that so far in the probe, they have not managed to unearth any regulatory failure on the part of SEBI in this entire matter. So let me just take you through the operative portions of quite an exhaustive report. It's 174 pages. But on page 28, where it's summarizing its findings, it says, in these circumstances, the committee is of the view that it would not be possible to return a finding of a regulatory failure in relation to compliance with regulatory stipulations governing minimum public shareholding stipulation. It adds a caveat, however, it says there indeed has to be a coherent enforcement policy, which is subsequently discussed in chapter 5. Let me also take you through paragraph 36, where another aspect of the transactions is actually dwelt upon. It says the committee has restricted itself to its stated remit, basically talking about its ambit of ascertaining whether there has been a regulatory failure. The committee is of the view that it would not be possible to return a finding of a regulatory failure in the context of the regulations prevailing when the transactions were effected. So that's of course the second such instance where no regulatory failure has been found. And if you go deeper, Priya, there's another paragraph towards the end of the report, and I'll just summarize that for the benefit of our viewers. Even with respect to the allegation of price manipulation, the report so far has not managed to unearth any regulatory failure. It's not been able to report to the Supreme Court that in its examination so far there has been any regulatory failure even on the allegation pertaining to price manipulation. So on these three fronts, no regulatory failure has been found as part of a larger framework that SEBI has been operating.
Right. No prima facie violation of existing rules or laws has been found. Harish, is it a clean sheet for Adani or is it a clean sheet to SEBI? Because they have been repeatedly insisting that our regulatory frameworks are, they have no loopholes, they are foolproof.
Is that question to me?
Yes, Harish.
Yes, in fact, this voluminous report says that there is no regulatory failure as far as price manipulation is concerned. The committee is of the view that it would not be possible to return a finding of a regulatory failure in relation to the compliance with the regulatory stipulations governing minimum public shareholding stipulation, but says there has to be a coherent enforcement policy. And so, in fact, in a way, it's the SEBI, the committee has not found any evidence of also. In a way that SEBI was hand in glove with the Adani group, says that SEBI, and it also says that the committee's remit is not to examine whether the price rise was justified, whereas its remit is to ascertain if there was a regulatory failure, and SEBI was actively engaged with developments and price movements in the market. It is the competent body. The committee also noted that all such investigations must be completed in a time-bound manner at this stage, taking into account the explanation provided by...
What the Supreme Court established committee has based its findings on is the submission by SEBI? Or have they conducted some sort of independent investigation as well?
Yes, what the report goes on to say is that as far as their probe is concerned, they have not found any regulatory failure, which means that there is no failure on the part of SEBI, but at the same time said that SEBI is the competent authority, experts body, which has to complete its probe at the earliest and come out with a finding. But previously, the SEBI has been given
additional 3 months has been given to SEBI to finalize their probe. Siddharth, there is another important excerpt that you need to run our viewers through. Over to you.
Yes, Priya, to answer your first question, in fact, in the summary of the report that this expert committee has now submitted to the Supreme Court, it's clearly said that there were extensive consultations that this committee was involved in with respect to officials from SEBI who did submit their own share of documents. There were also consultations held with some of the other stakeholders, including members of the Enforcement Directorate, among other agencies as well that do look into financial transactions. Now, another very important paragraph that needs to be highlighted here, Priya, is with respect to the allegations around price manipulation, and this is what the committee has had to say with respect to there being no regulatory illegality, so to speak. Let me just actually run you through that. All these are still under investigation, and the committee therefore does not express any opinion on merits. So it's not going to the merits, but it does say it does not return a finding of a regulatory failure on this count, since SEBI has an active and working surveillance framework. So SEBI has actually been doing its job, monitoring these transactions. It has an extensive surveillance framework, and at this juncture, the committee cannot jump to a conclusion that there has been any regulatory failure on this front as well with respect to pricing.
Right. Thank you, Siddharth, for joining us with those insights. We take a very quick break.